I think it's just that I have a published book and that I can say I'm a published author. And the first time I shared it on LinkedIn, I just put a picture of me and my book and I was like, I'm so excited. I published my book and it went viral because people were just so excited to support me and my journey, and they shared it and commented, and it was like the first viral post I ever had.
Hi, and welcome to Season 8 of the 15-ish Minute Coffee Chat with Anna Larson and Selena Conmack. Together with their rotating panel of expert guests, these real-life boss babes share lessons learned and best practices you can use to level up your business. Anna is the owner of Nomadabout and is known for blending killer copy with proven marketing methods to create exciting business communications. Selena owns Howley Socially Inspired, and from layout to launch, her sleek website design and trending social media strategies provide a memorable customer experience with a taste of that famous Aloha spirit. Now it's time to laugh and be inspired, so grab a cup of coffee and enjoy the show.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the 15-ish Minute Coffee Chat live stream and podcast with Anna and Selena. 8 seasons of best practices and advice for entrepreneurs and small business owners. Have you ever wanted to write your story or share your expertise in a book? Guest Amanda Huffman, author, podcast host, and blogger, shares how she took her expertise as a woman in the military and translated into being a blogger, podcast host, freelance writer, and published author. All the things I want to be. Yeah. Let's talk about how you can write your own story in today's 15-ish Minute Coffee Chat. Hi.
Yay.
Man, today feels like a Monday because,
It is not Monday. It is Tuesday, but I am very excited about this conversation today with Amanda because she really has accomplished like some of the things on my dream bucket list.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's kind of like, wow, somebody actually was able to do it. Now maybe I can figure out how.
I know. No, I'm very, I was just telling her backstage, right? Like I've followed her and I'm excited. This is the first time I actually physically or maybe in real person time, like actually get to like speak to her. And I've just kind of followed her journey from, I want to say it's been 3 years since I entered a group that I was just like, she was in, and I was like, wow, I remember her saying in the group, I'm just doing it. This is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And she did it, but she's a vet. She is a male spouse. She is a mom. She's all these things. And I'm just like, I'm inspired constantly by the people that I get to like be around. And so I'm excited we have her on today, I know.
So, me too. Okay. So before we get started too far in, we do want to just welcome everybody. Thank you for jumping in and joining us live today. And if you're catching the replay, just let us know in the comments. Just hit hashtag replay so that we know that you came back to watch the show.
Mm-hmm.
And tell us where you're joining from. We'd love to hear, where you're at in the world. And please feel free to ask questions and leave comments during the live stream. We love for this to be super interactive.
Yeah. Amanda's here. Ask away, you guys, and maybe she can give you a real-time answer.
Yes. Yeah.
And also we do have always our call to action question that we like to ask. And so Anna's going to ask you it.
I know. I want to know, for anyone that's watching live right now, have you ever wanted to write your story or share your expertise in a book? Mm-hmm. I want to know how many other people have that on their bucket list to be a published author, like a for real published author,
Yeah.
I wrote a book in like 7th grade and I bound it myself and all that. And I don't think that counts.
I'm going to have this question for Amanda. I want to ask her, who does she see playing her when they make a movie out of her book? Like, do you know what I'm saying?
Yes,
like, who is the actress that is like going to be her?
Yes.
Yeah.
So drop in the comments if you've ever wanted to write and publish your own book or about anything. It could be a life story. It could be an expertise. It could be business oriented, whatever. We don't care. We just want to know if it's one of your dreams. So
yeah, totally. All right. Let's go. Anna we're going to share a little bit about Amanda in case you haven't heard, and also for our podcast. So take it away, Anna.
Yeah. So Amanda is a military spouse and veteran. She served in the Air Force for 6 years as a civil engineer, including a deployment to Afghanistan. Amanda met her husband while attending college. They served active duty together until their first son was born, and then she traded in her combat boots for a diaper bag, which I think is so darn cute, to stay home. Amanda is a mom of 2 boys, continues to follow her husband's military career. She's lived in New Mexico, Ohio, California, and currently resides in Northern Virginia. She published her first book in 2019 entitled it Women of the Military. This is where she shared stories of 28 military women. And then in 2019, she launched her podcast, also titled Women in the Military. It has over 170 episodes and is super popular. If you have not listened to Amanda's podcast, very, very interesting stories. In September, her newest book, A Girl's Guide to Military Service, is being released. And the goal of this book is to help girls, women who are considering the military and helping to answer the questions that they might have. She's been published on many military sites and magazines, and you can learn more about her at airmantomom.com, but we'll tell you more about that later. We got all the ways you can connect with Amanda coming later.
We totally do. I'm so excited. I'm excited. I think, like I said, I'm just about, I love the empowerment of women and just sharing our story in every field that we are really a part of, that I think sometimes history forgets, right? We get like a little byline, like in a big 29,000 chapter book that says, oh, and by the way, this woman helped save the lives of 1 million people. One sentence. You know what I mean? So I'm just glad Amanda is sharing. Okay, so shall we bring her in?
I need to bring her in. Let me bring her in, then we'll continue talking about her. How about that?
Okay. Hi, Amanda.
Hi. I'm so excited to be here.
We are excited to have you. Okay, before we do our coffee cup, who is going to play you in your movie? I just need to know, have you thought about that since I asked that question a second ago?
Well, I'm still working on writing my memoir, and I feel like I have to figure that out first, because I've done that process of starting and stopping, and I realize how hard it is to write a memoir. So I first have to do that, and then
have.
We'll get to the.
Okay, I will tell you.
You know who I was thinking of? Emily Blunt, because she's in.
Yes,
I Repeat.
Good choice.
Love her. Great choice.
Yeah,
I love her. She's good in so many, and her accents can be so many things, right? So. I mean, love
she's
that.
Mary Poppins. And,
Fred, that's my favorite Disney character.
I think she's a fabulous choice.
Yeah. I will tell you. I will tell you my favorite, like who I've always wanted to play me no matter what is. Hi, Tiffany. I love Charleston, by the way. He's Sandra Bullock. Like, she's gonna play whatever story I choose to write. Like, that's what I want to do. Oh, I got excited. Okay, there we go. Okay. All right. Okay. Before we get off track, because we're known to do that when we get excited. Hi, Deb. Welcome to the show.
Deb wants to write a book. Deb, I can't wait to read it.
Yay. Well, perfect show to watch. Okay. Coffee Up Selfie we're going to do with Amanda. Okay. Ready, Anna? 1 through, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Okay. Shall we dive into our first question?
We absolutely should. So Amanda, you've written 2 books, one that has been published, but you've also done a lot of other things like blogging and whatnot. So our very first question is, how did you know that this was a story you wanted to tell? And now when I say this, it could be any number of things, but how did you know this was something that you wanted to share?
I guess the way I'd answer that is how I ended up focusing on women in the military, because before I focused on women in the military, I was a mom blogger, I was a travel blogger, I was a natural birth blogger, I was all the bloggers that I was like bouncing all over the place and trying to figure out where the right place to be was. And I really didn't want to focus on military stuff, but every time I wrote about being a veteran and being a military spouse, those things resonated. And in 2017, I did a deployment series because I'm crazy, and I did this 31-day series where I wrote every day in October, and I'd done it twice, and I was like, I don't want to write every day, so I'm going to interview people and I'll do deployments. And I expected it to be mainly men who responded to my query, and instead it was almost all women, and they had these amazing stories, and I was like, whoa, women in the military are doing all kinds of crazy stuff that people don't know about, and I want to hear more. So I said, I don't care about deployment anymore. I'm going to focus on women. And that was where it led me on a path to dive deeper and deeper and do more things and help women in more ways. And now I'm trying to switch kind of a pivot to girls who are in high school, junior high, who are looking for what they're going to do after high school.
Interesting. So it was like this series of journeys that allowed you to niche down your focus. And that's what then created, like, I've got a story that's worth sharing, not just in, you know, a podcast or not on a mommy blog or whatever, but in an actual physical hardbound book people can buy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. I it's so, you know, I like, you know how you just said, Anna, it's sometimes it's like you accidentally stumble on your next big, like the unexpected story you didn't mean to tell, you know, like, so I honestly, I'm so like surprised to hear, I thought you were like, yeah, I had a plan. This is what I'm going to do, you know? So
Right.
it is, you guys, it just pays to tell, whatever. It's a Monday, Tuesday. Don't fret is what I'm trying to say. Amanda had a journey to her first book.
Well, I think that it's interesting too, because you might think that you're going to start out somewhere here. And then as you progress down that path, then things are going to happen or occur that might change your focus a little bit and have you end up here. So maybe the lesson, and if there is a lesson, right? But maybe the lesson comes down to, like, don't be so focused on the end result that you miss what maybe could happen in between to really make it what it should, you know, make the end result actually change or morph or become something just a little bit different, but better than what you had originally thought you were going to be doing. So I love that idea of, like, you know, because so many people are like, I tend to be this way. I say so many people, and I'm talking about myself, really, right? I tend to be that way where I'm like, this is what I'm going to do. And then nothing's going to take me off that path. Where I think if maybe I was more open to influences or ideas that were coming as they went, that it might change my path a little bit and even change that end result. But is it for the better, right? You know what I mean by that?
Yeah. And you have to try different things and, like, treat them like experiments, because one of the big things I did in my podcast is I did a solo episode and I titled it What I Wish I Would Have Known Before I Joined the Military. And it, like, skyrocketed and got so many downloads. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And at first I thought it was because it was a solo episode, but then I tried a few other topics and they didn't have the same response. And I realized it was the topic. And so that led me to start thinking, what other ways can I help women who are joining the military? Because obviously that's something they're looking for. Because so you have to, like, try things. And, like, I tried it as a solo episode, not realizing trying it and having that be the topic was what would change everything about where I was going.
Yeah.
So you have to, like, be open, but also pay attention, right, to the data you're given. Like you said, you looked at the data on your podcast versus the others, and knowing, like, but also, like, not ignoring it, right? Like, right. Don't ignore the fact that this did really well. It's like, what is that, like, trying to shove a circle in a square box,
right,
or shape? See, this is why I shouldn't teach people. Like, okay, all right. No, I love that, and okay, let's move on to our next question. I'm excited.
I know. So our next question really moves on to the writing and actual publishing. So tell us a little bit about your journey, and tell us one major obstacle to writing and publishing your very own book.
So my first book was kind of an accident. It was actually supposed to be a blog series, but as we mentioned, I'm a military spouse, and we PCS to Virginia in 2018. And I had all the stories ready for the blog series in October, but I was feeling really overwhelmed because we had just moved, and there's still a lot more work after you do the interviews to, like, put it on the blog and promote it and all the things. And my friend was like, you don't have to do this. And I was like, oh, I don't. But then I had all these stories and I had interviewed all these people, and I felt a responsibility to get them out there. And so that's when originally they were my backups for when I started the podcast. In case I didn't get enough people to be on the podcast, I could have these stories, and I was going to force my husband to read the questions, and then I was going to read the answers. Luckily, we didn't have to worry about that. But I ended up having like so much demand that the backup plan didn't work. And so then I was like, well, what am I going to do? And then Liz Ann Lightfoot actually told me about Kindle Direct Publishing, and she recommended I look into that. And so I used Amazon's Kindle Direct Publishing, and I took the stories and put them all in one Word document and then made it into a book.
I love that. So there's so many different pieces of this, right?
Like, can you imagine, Amanda, if you had said, I'm not doing this, you're right, to that friend, and you didn't like move forward like with doing the book? Like, you know what I mean? When you're tired, well, first of all, that is, I cannot believe you PCS while you were doing this. But isn't that the life of every military family, right? It's like, if I use that as an excuse, I would not be doing things because we're always moving. Okay. So
I agree with John's comment. KDP is a hugely underrated publishing tool. So
yes,
it opens doors to your future.
For sure.
Tell us how that happened for you. Like, how did it open a door for you?
I think it's just that I have a published book and that I can say I'm a published author. And the first time I shared it on LinkedIn, I just put a picture of me and my book, and I was like, I'm so excited, I published my book. And it went viral because people were just so excited to support me and my journey, and they shared it and commented, and it was like the first viral post I ever had. And it kind of changed like how I operated on LinkedIn, because I got so many connections and so much exposure for both me and the podcast and the book. And it was just a picture of me holding my book, and people didn't know anything about it, but they've been watching my journey and they had seen what had happened, and then they were really excited about what I was doing. And so I think that was one of the first things. And then there's probably other things where people say your name in rooms that you don't know that they're saying your name, that a book just helps that to happen.
Yeah. I feel like self-publishing used to have a really bad name, and that has changed over the past like 10, 15 years, where people are now self-publishing, and it is a great way to get into the book market and to share your expertise without having to go through the very long. I mean, because I have friends that have published with traditional publishers, and sometimes it's like 3 or 4 years before their book actually comes out on the market, right? And there's something to be said about going that direction as well. I mean, I'm not saying one is better than the other by any means, but if you have a story that you want to tell and you have all the information and you're a good writer and whatnot, then I think that something like KDP is absolutely a great direction, or, first step to take, right?
Yeah. I've had friends and even clients I've helped them. And that process is not as hard as we all seem to think. I think the hardest part is writing the book and creating it. That's the hardest part. But I mean, they've put up planners, they've done like e-course books, like you name it. And I'm like, wow, okay, KDP, like, I don't know why everybody, why is not everybody doing this, right? Because it can be overwhelming, that process. So I'm just glad you did it. I'm glad you had Anyway, yes.
If we jump back to the question, Amanda, what would you say is the one major obstacle that you encountered when you were going through that process of self-publishing through KDP?
Well, KDP is so easy. So the hardest part was like going on the website and figuring out what the first step was. And then after I took the first step, it was like, oh, this is really easy. You just download this form, you load up this, and like you modify the document. And I had to move it around a few times to get the spacing right, but it was so easy to use and simple that and you don't have to put any money up front. The Amazon lists your book for free. They sell your book for free. And they make it so easy that it's really a simple process. And the hard part is the writing the book.
Yeah. I love this comment.
Yeah.
Amanda, I think it kind of embodies everything that you're saying today, right? Your willingness to pivot, try something new, listen to what people need, and still doing what you love. So, yay, we're all cheering you on right now.
Yes, always.
Thank you.
So if you're catching what Amanda is saying, right, the obstacle is not within like KDP per se. it's just really yourself. You will be your own obstacle in this process.
Yeah.
So write the book.
Right.
Make the book cover, right? I want to share the funniest thing is, so in KDP, right, like when you do that barcode thing on the back, how Amazon puts it, our client had to redo her back cover a couple different times just so that the barcode didn't sit on something important, because you don't think about that when you're designing, right? So you guys catch what Amanda's throwing down. There's not really an obstacle. Seriously.
Except writing a book is really hard.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I regret most about KDP is that I didn't have a professional editor who helped me edit the book, and it was interviews. So I kind of got away with not having a professional editor because it's their stories and I didn't take their answers and make it into a story. And so I think if you're writing a book, you should definitely look into having an editor go through it at the end to help you with grammar. And usually you need 2 editors sometimes. Sometimes you need a content development editor and an editor who does grammar. And so it can be expensive to get both of those things. But if you're doing like a workbook or something like that, you don't have to worry about that. So it is still hard. I'm not saying it's easy.
Right. The hard part is the developing of the content for sure. Gosh, I'm glad I know somebody below that like at least understands grammar, because Amanda, I tell you what. Okay, having said that, do you think like no, okay, well, we're not going to talk about a future book. I'm like, is there going to be like a volume 2 of like, your original first book? I mean, is that
The Women of the Military?
Yeah.
No, it's the podcast.
Okay. That's where it is.
So like 1 thing at a time, I'm doing a podcast.
Yes. Yeah.
I thought about transcribing the stories from the podcast, but it's a lot of work to do that. And I don't think it would be worth the amount of work that would pay off, because you can go on the podcast free and listen to the stories. And I was doing transcripts in the program that I use, and people weren't reading them, so it was like, it's not really worth it.
I hear you. All right, Anna, let's shuffle into our next question.
Yeah, so before we do that, let's show Amanda's new book that's coming out. So before we talk about like our last question with her.
Yes.
So Amanda, tell us about your new book that's coming out in September, what it is and what you're doing with it.
So it's called A Girl's Guide to Military Service, and I have A Girl's Guide to the Military on my website as a free guide. And I created that because I wanted to help women transition out of the military, which sounds funny, but my business coach at the time said, where is the earliest in the process that you can help them? And so I kept going back of, when can I help them? When can I help them? And I realized that if I help them when they're joining the military, I can help set them up for when they leave the military. And so that's how the idea of creating the lead magnet, the free Girl's Guide to the Military. And then I created it, and I was like, how am I going to find girls who want to join in the military? And they found it, and I don't really know how they found it. I shared it, and they found it, and they keep downloading it. And so that was when I was like, oh, I need to dive deeper, because there's obviously a need and a market for this, because I'm not even really advertising it, and people keep downloading it. And if I advertised it, how much more downloads would it get, and how many more people, and how much more can I write about it? So that's how it came. But it's basically meant to help you from your joining the military, deciding if the military is right for you, the early process of picking a career field, picking a branch, going to MEPS, preparing for basic training, and then the first few years of the military, relationships, military sexual trauma, deciding if you want to stay in at the end of your career, becoming a mom, things like that. Anything that I could think of what do I wish I would have known when I was joining the military, and focusing specifically on a woman's perspective, and not like, because there's a lot of how to join the military, but they have like a chapter about women. And basically it's like, it's hard to be a woman in the military. I wanted to get past that and talk about how, like, the real things, like periods and stuff like that.
Yeah. That require more than a chapter.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Or at least some guidance. All those questions, I'm sure that women who are considering going into the military or girls that are in high school are like, well, what about if I'm deployed or in training and this happens, right? Like, is there a resource for me? What do I do? Right. I mean, I would be super uncomfortable, and who do I talk to, or, those kinds of things. So I love that you're giving, it's like a practical guide or a practical hands-on, hey, this is how it works for you kind of thing. And I think that's so needed. And this is why people are coming, right? It's like that.
Yeah.
It's
needed. It's a resource that is not out there that you're providing, right? Like every chapter is dedicated to you, ladies.
All right. So now that we've asked her about her new book, our third question is, what did you do differently when writing your first book, Women of the Military, and now your second book, A Girl's Guide to Military Service?
So I got a publisher this time, and I wrote a book proposal after I had written the first few chapters, and I got an editor to help me with my book proposal, and I submitted it. And you were talking about how it takes a long time. I submitted it, I think, during the pandemic, so in 2020, and then I've been working on it, and it's going to be published in September of 2022. So it was a long process, and I started writing it in 2019, near the end of 2019, and then submitted it in July of 2020. And so it's been a long process. And one of the things that helped with the editor is that when I was writing, I was starting to get too in the technicalities of like how to become an officer. And then I would like list all the academies and all the ways of ROTC instead of just saying, you can be an officer, you can be enlisted, and here's the main differences. I would get too much. And so the publisher really helped get me refocused on like my question and focus on my avatar of a 16-year-old girl in high school who is considering the military and doesn't have a military connection. And so they would really help me be like, you're like the ship's going the wrong way, get back on course. And so they really helped me get back on course and focus on that question and help me create the outline in a more detailed way so that I could stay focused. I would like be writing and then I'd be like, oh, my outline is way over here and I'm way over here, and I'd have to like erase and then get back on track. And so that was the real thing that they've helped me. And then every time that I've submitted it for edits, they help make it better, and they're able to like, I'm talking about like sensitive topics like military sexual trauma, and like my heart is really there to help them, but sometimes the way that it's written, it comes off offensive. And so they were able to help me redirect my words and say it in a way that wasn't offensive and that got me where I wanted to be, instead of if I'd done it all on my own, I wouldn't have been able to see that.
I love that. I love that thought process. Again, if we go back to that comment where they said your willingness to pivot and listen, right? Like that's so much a part of your journey. And I feel like that fits so well into your process, even with the second book, where you are touching on sensitive subjects, but also just understanding a way to say it so that it's consumable for the greater population, as opposed to a very specific kind of person, maybe. Or somebody looking for one specific thing. But I also love that between the two different ways that you went and published, both times you saw value in content editing and just editing in general, right? So I think that's like a huge lesson learned, like regardless of whether you're publishing it yourself or going with a traditional publisher, there needs to be another set of eyes to help you step back and see what the content is actually saying. Right?
Yes, for sure.
I'm not an author yet, but Amanda is inspiring me. I write articles for another organization, and it's so weird to like get to just write, and then I send the editor like the article, and she comes back with edits, and I'm like, she's like, don't be offended. I'm like, gosh, no, not at all. Like this just. Okay, I love what you're doing, because it even helps me be a better writer for the next article, because I'm thinking ahead of like how I was submitting. Anyway, Man, yeah,
I do
editing
have to
is
ask
great.
though. I have to ask on that. Have there ever been times where they've wanted to edit something and you're like, no, it really needs to be like this, or they want to take something out and you're like, but this is so important, I really want it in. So has there ever been that kind of like, they're taking too much of me out of it, as opposed to, sure, go ahead, whatever you want, I feel like that would be a struggle for me.
I mean, that does happen, but usually when that happens, you can see, maybe not in the moment, in the hindsight, you can see like how it made the article better for their focus and their audience. And I think the biggest thing was one time I was working with a company and they wanted to title veteran with a capital V. And I was like, that's not grammatically correct. And they're like, well, that's our policy. And I was like, okay. But I was like kind of cringing because I was like, I know that's wrong. And now people are going to see my name attached to it. And it's capital, but that was their policy. And I was like, well, that's their policy. So, but yeah. But I remember it.
When their brand doesn't align to your brand, right?
Yeah. No, that is interesting. And I guess, right, like you have to kind of sit there and zoom out and see like, okay, what does this work? Does this, I get, and I know what Anna's talking about. So I those experiences of editing and not having your own vibe to it and tone to it, right? And how much do you push back? But I think that says something too, that you had a publisher that really aligned with you, right, Amanda? Like the editing, and you could collaboratively work together so you could still get your message out the way you wanted.
Yeah, I think a lot of it just has to do with, maybe it is finding that publisher that can understand really who you are, maybe, and get and keep your personality into the process, if that makes sense. Maybe, I don't know.
And it's like, yeah,
I know. I mean, I'm just thinking, well, mostly I think because when we are writing something, well, I know when I write something, it's almost always there's a passion or a feeling that goes into what I write, sometimes, not all the time. Like, some things I'm like, okay, I can write this, but I'm not passionate about it. But if it's something I'm doing for myself, like if I were to be writing a book, there would be part of me going into that, and to have it edited out would be a difficult process. But I love what you said. Again, maybe not in the moment, but if you step back, give yourselves a couple of months or maybe a year and be like, okay, I see why now this was an important part to change or a piece to remove, or whatever that might be. So anyway, I love this process, man. I'm super intrigued by it. I know.
And Anna does need time sometimes. She just needs to process. So
I do. I am not. I sometimes constructive criticism does not go well with me.
No, not at all. All right. I think we are at the segment where we're near the end of our show. We normally try to keep it at 30. We're at 33 just because we love the conversation. So we're going to pop this in, and Amanda is going to tell you all where you can continue the conversation with her.
So
go ahead, Amanda.
So my favorite place to hang out is LinkedIn, if you couldn't tell already, but I love hanging out on LinkedIn, and I'm also on Twitter, and then I have Facebook and Instagram, but I'm not very active there. And I also have my podcast, Women of the Military, that you can find on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. And so that is another place to connect with me. And you can always go to my blog to see the latest episodes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, speaking of, so you guys, LinkedIn, website, Twitter, those are all the places.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, speaking of your podcast, we always love to recommend a toolkit that we think you should have in your pocket. And Amanda mentioned her podcast, and we want that to be something added to your playlist so you can catch up on the episodes, see what she's talking about. I'm going to just let Amanda give you a little synopsis of what the podcast is about and why you should be listening to it.
So the reason I created the podcast was because I served in the military, and I didn't know really any history of military women, and so I knew that people didn't know that, and the stories of women of the military are amazing. And the only screening I do is that you have to be a woman veteran to be on the podcast. There's exceptions, but that's the main screening of most of my guests. And then I get to tell the stories of women, and we always start with, why did you decide to join the military, go through their military experience, and then end with advice for the next generation of military women. And so those, I've done some roundups of the advice, and those are my favorite episodes. So that's where episode 100, I know off the top of my head, is one of those episodes, and it just is my favorite episode to listen to, because I love hearing all the advice from women to the next generation of women. And yeah, and that's what the podcast is about.
Okay, I'm definitely gonna pop over to episode 100 today.
I
Then,
know,
like,
right?
for sure, because I love a good roundup, and I love hearing like cumulative advice from guests. Like, oh, it's just kind of like, that's the kind of episode you need, right? Like, where you're, oh, okay, I love it. So you guys go today. She just said it's all on all the podcast streaming. Like, there's no reason not to find it.
Exactly.
Just put it in there. Just put it in there. All right. Okay. We are, Anna is going to just share a little tip from Caitlin Eldridge, who I love.
Oh, yes. Okay. So our tip jar today is to keep all receipts because you might need them in case of an audit. So we did, yesterday was tax day. So if you didn't submit your taxes, hopefully you submitted an extension. And if you didn't do either of those, hopefully you're getting a return. But either way, make sure you have all of your receipts, because for at least 7 years, and at any time you can be audited for those expenses. So keep them. That's the tip for today.
All right. We filed for an extension, so it's, we're almost there.
Yeah, I am sorry if I'm the bearer of bad news to anyone listening right now, but that was yesterday, tax day.
All right. Yeah, here we go, Anna.
All right. So next week, we have our guest, Laura Templeton, on, and we are going to be talking about the power of brand communities. She and her business partner own a coffee company, and they have a seriously crazy story about getting hacked and losing their account and how they were able to get it back. Anyway, it's super fascinating. I'm really excited to have this conversation, but join us with Laura Templeton, where we're going to talk about, like I said, power of brand communities next Tuesday at 10 a.m. And then also, please go to our podcast and subscribe. Go to our YouTube channel and subscribe. You can also find Anna and Selena at annaandselena.com, on LinkedIn under either of our names, Facebook, Instagram, or your favorite, like I already mentioned, podcast platform. So first go download number 100 on Amanda's, and then head over to the 15-ish minute coffee chat and hit subscribe on both of those, and give us some viewer love. We would appreciate it. You're muted, Selena.
I was trying to get through one show where Anna doesn't have to tell me that. But we'll make sure to have all the links to Amanda's website. And she did actually share a link with us for the release of the book, her new book coming out. So we'll make sure to include that in the podcast description. So you guys can
in the comments too.
Yeah.
Right now.
But Amanda, thank you so much for popping on today.
Yes.
I'm excited. I feel like your new book in September needs to go to every school's JROTC programs. Am I saying that right? I'm the worst military wife. I swear I don't know acronyms. I say them backwards. My husband is he has to pause every time I speak out loud in public. But thank you so much for joining. We've been excited to have you, and we're so glad you said yes. And you guys, if you could see me and Amanda's LinkedIn messages back and forth, you know what I mean? It was we were like, how about this? No, how about that? It was hysterical. We made it work though, because that's what we do, right, Amanda? But thank you for coming on. We appreciate you.
We really do. Thank you.
Sending all the good vibes for a really successful launch. You let us know what we can do to kind of promote it as well, because I think supporting all our fellow women, fellow military spouses is super important. So
absolutely.
We'll catch you around.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Bye, guys.
Thanks for joining us.